Grimly Fables. Alright. Which story shall we start with? This one, You had a whole shelf. Alright, let's see. You picked out The Summer Fox. Well, I'm sure something magical drew you to this story. This tale, like most, took place many years ago in a small cabin in the woods, told by a young man named Samuel, or Sam for short. I thought I could write out my story for the next person who moves in the mountains, so they may too share my experiences. It all started around 7 years ago, when I decided to pack my things and move out of the city. Crazy idea, I know. Into a half-built cabin deep in the woodland mountains. I can't tell you how many times I second-guessed that decision. When I saw the ragged, beat-up thing I could be calling home for now till forever. Possible, right? With no handiwork skills, 2 hens, a rooster, and 3 months' worth of rations. But life finds a way, I guess. First I wondered about the property, trying to conjure some resemblance of a plan. The chicken hut over by the grassy thicket, and a well by the rocky soil, so it's close to the garden. Finally, some order, or I thought, till the task of fixing the cabin and all its leaks presented itself. It took a few days, but I managed to find some loose lumber around and built a semi-stable hut for the chickens to roost in. I think they liked it because they laid an egg the next day, but they also destroyed it before I could harvest it for breakfast. So Sam continued to make the best of his situation, and even ran into some farmers that lived a little ways down the road. They were able to give him a few pointers on the land, and good thing too, because he was down to only a month of rations left, and needed to start gathering food for himself. Autumn was also starting, which meant Sam had a lot of work to do before winter. But to his surprise, he would receive some much-needed company. Thanks to some farmers, I finally had my feet under me. Growing fresh food instead of eating stale crackers for dinner was nice. The yard was full of life, and insects investigated the new grow beds, and chirping, coming from newly hatched chicks. Just in time, too. Autumn had arrived, and the mountains had just turned all shades of red, violet, orange, and yellow, as the leaves started to prepare to litter the forest floor. How lucky was I? I just needed to complete the repairs in my home before the first snowfall in a couple of months. I stared contentedly at the wooden cabin. Maybe a window there. Definitely needs a stove in the living room. And some patches for the roof. But my thoughts were intruded by the sounds of squawking from the chickens. As I looked over at the hut, just beyond my gaze, pop! I saw 2 bright red ears flicker. In panic, I rushed over, startling a young red fox who bolted for the tree line. Just before entering, he looked back at me in what I could only describe as a confused manner, then darted into the fallen leaves, vanishing. Was I the crazy one? He was the one that was trying to steal from me. I had the right to chase him off, didn't I? But the thoughts quickly expired, as now a new problem lay in my lap. Predators, of course. How did I not think of that before? Well, I hadn't really seen any until that day. But no matter. I had a chat with the farmers about protecting my birds. They agreed. Raccoons, hawks, bobcats, and sometimes even coyotes were a big problem, and that getting a dog has helped them protect their land. I hesitantly chimed in with, "What about foxes?" They looked at each other, somewhat puzzled. Then the man spoke up and said, "There hasn't been foxes in these parts for 20 or 30 years now. Not after the trappers come through here collecting pelts for the fur trade." They then persisted that I get a dog after winter went by. I thanked them again and left for home. I would see the fox many times while I worked during the fall, sneaking along the tree line, chasing squirrels, or jumping in and out of the large leaf piles I had made in the field. But the strangest thing was he would sit and wait right by an old fence post that sat between the chicken hut and the start of the field every morning at dusk. Once I stepped outside, he would go on about his day as did I. Why did it remind me of a loyal dog waiting by the door for his master to return home after a long day? This question sat on my mind many a day, but I had bigger plans, for winter was on its way. This thought sparked sympathy in me, for I had never seen the red fox eat before, so I decided to leave a treat for him, a single egg by the fence post, since I had plenty and he needed it for whatever foxes do in the winter. Plus, why would the fox ever need to steal from me if I gave it food? At least I thought. The next morning, without fail, the fox was waiting by the post and the egg was gone. As I stepped out of the door, though, the ground crunched under my foot. Yolk and dirt stuck to the sole of my shoe. Who put an egg by the doorstep? Did he bring it back? My gift was returned by a seemingly hungry wild animal. Just to test, I left another egg and got the same results. An egg found its way from the edge of the field back to my doorstep. But why? Doesn't he know it's food for him? I tried 2 eggs and was still unsuccessful. So I stopped till one night 4 rotten eggs started to smell in the kitchen. So I set them right outside my door in hopes nature would dispose of them for me. In the morning they were gone, and I was a little happy that something got a meal out of them. I later realized there was egg shrapnel by the post where the red fox waited for me. With curiosity, I left another egg by the door the next night and got the same results the following morning. Then it hit me. A fox doesn't want gifts. It wants to steal and test its wits. So for a week, I hid eggs around the cabin, checking every morning just to get excited when it got stolen by my new fox friend. But the fun did not last, as the leaves soon fell and a white blanket laid over the mountains overnight. But the fun did not last, as the leaves soon fell and a white blanket got laid over the mountains overnight. After I realized my eggs were no longer being found by Red, it sank in that my friend had moved on. However, it wasn't too long after that these strange holes started to appear in the snow around my door, almost as if something was searching. Perhaps a new friend came to steal some eggs? Indeed, it was a new friend, who would dig the eggs out of the snow when I buried them. But this friend was not red. He was snowy white. A white fox sat at the same post, waiting to greet me in the brisk mornings, just as the red fox did. I won't lie, having company was nice, as wintertime can be very lonely, waiting to see if you make it to springtime. And soon enough, it was spring. The birds returned to make nests as the snow melted away and bright green shrubs started to cover the ground. Just like the red fox, the snowy fox stopped stealing eggs and disappeared just before the start of spring. And just like the other two, another friend greeted me by the post, my springtime friend, or friends. This was a silverish gray fox, who was a mother of 2 fox pups, who would nervously poke out from behind her every now and again. I made sure to leave extra eggs for her and the pups, since the chickens were also blooming with this season of growth. Then summer started to approach faster than watching the pups grow up, and once they left the mountain, I eagerly waited to meet my summer fox friend. A month of summer went with no fox coming to take the place of the silver mother. The days went by, but there was no one to play my egg game, or sit by the post and greet me in the warm mornings. The mountains seemed empty and lonely during the summer. Though Sam spent his summers alone, his foxes returned every other season to greet him. Red during autumn, snowy for winter months, and the silver mother in the springtime. He spent 4 years repeating this cycle, but he soon realized he couldn't tell anyone about his friends, for he feared they would be targeted by fur traders. That was until the summer fox appeared. It was normal spring, and I started to prepare myself for another lonely summer, knowing I could have to wait until autumn to see my friend Red again. I did my usual chores, watering and feeding the livestock. The grass grew very tall that spring, about halfway up the fence post, in fact. As I admired nature, 2 massive ears popped up out of the grass, nearly startling me. What on earth was it? I couldn't make it out. Maybe a rabbit? But the ears were tan like dry hay. Anyway, I continued to work, just to have a small tan fox sprint out of the grass and stop just a few feet away from me. As I was collecting eggs in a basket, it stared intently at the basket. I picked an egg out, and his eyes followed as I moved the egg in the air. I slowly rolled the egg over, and he gladly took it and ran back to the fence post. Just a few moments later, he returned to look at the basket, so I complied and rolled another over. I was ecstatic. Finally, the summer fox had arrived in the mountains. He also liked a strange game. Well, he was more like a puppy that came to me for food until he was full. Then he would go sleep on the hay by the large animals. Now my cabin home would never feel lonely, because I have a friend for all 4 seasons. That's what I hoped for, at least. One day, my summer friend didn't pop out of the grass as he usually did. My hope quickly fled, since autumn was still a ways away, and the fox had already left. Only when a loud metal snap came from the tree line did my heart sink. The sound of an animal getting caught in a hunter's trap. Fearful it was my friend, I rushed to investigate. Soon sharp barks and howls of hounds rushing through the trees sent me into a panic. I sprinted through the trees, only to trip and fall over something that rattled. It was a chain, staked in the ground and connected to a small cage, which held my newest friend. I hurried over to release him, and with hunters nearing, he bolted for the tall grass. And I knew I probably would never see my summer friend again. But, to my surprise, he waited by the fence post for me the following morning. I readied an egg for him as he slowly approached. I waved it in the air to get him to come close, but his eyes seemed fixed on the ground. He only stopped once he was at my feet, and gently laid a tiny egg on the ground, then looked up at me and waited for me to accept his gift. I picked it up to investigate. The egg was much too small to be from a hen, so he must have collected it out in the mountains. Or maybe that was what lured him into the trap in the first place. When I looked back down, the tiny fox began to walk back to the post, and just before entering the grass, he looked back. I understood that I would never see my tiny friend again, but I would soon realize that none of my fox friends would be waiting for me by the post. Just then he hopped into the grass, and I tracked his ears as he pranced until he vanished and was gone forever. Autumn came and went, but red never came to play in my leaf piles. Winter arrived, but no holes were dug. Spring didn't produce any mothers showing her pups how to eat eggs, and summer was lonely again without the summer fox. You may think this is a sad story, but I will now and forever be happy that my dear fox friends are safe on another mountain where they can find their own eggs to steal. Happier than a fox stealing an egg. Not a bad story at all. Just know, there are some bad eggs in this world, but it is up to you to learn a lesson and be grateful it happened, not hateful that it happened to you.